Okay, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome back, everybody. This is our third part of Revitalize. We're having an opportunity to, although we're so far from the tefillah in so many ways, it's a different year. We're trying to reinvest ourselves in our davening. And we've looked at over the last few weeks. The last 2 weeks ago, we looked at the Yud Gimel Midos. A week ago, we looked at the Unatan Tokef. And this week, we're going to spend a little bit of time together. For myself and Rabbi Talib, I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking at the Vidui. Very much apropos now, we're doing Vidui every day through the Slichos, and we're going to be continuing to do it numerous times over the span of Erev Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur as well. So this is really a incredible opportunity for us to revisit what seems to be something which we do so often. So just as a word of intro, and then we'll jump straight into it, is Vidui. Vidui is a very important part of our journey. And when you think about the word Vidui, one of the interesting things to think about is, what does that word actually mean? Like Vidui itself. Vidui sounds like you'd say maybe it's an Aramaic word, but it is not an Aramaic word. It appears explicitly in the Torah. The Rambam says, in fact, he's quoting by Midra Perakei, it talks about Vizvadu esachatosam asher asu. You should do Vidui. You should admit to the sins which you did. So I was wondering, so where does it come from? And the answer is actually pretty obvious. If you look at all the Mefarshim on the Pasuk, the Menachem, Machberes Menachem, which actually Rashi usually quotes for, source of the word, says it comes from the word moedeh, which means to admit. Moedeh, Vidui is I'm admitting. And he actually says something fascinating. He says it also relates to the word lehodot, which means to thank. So that's so interesting. Most of the times when we're doing Vidui, we're not thinking too much about the thanking part of things. We're thinking about the looking inwards and the beating the chest and feeling it, but there's an element of thankfulness, and there's an element of recognizing, of realizing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's realm in our lives, and perhaps the levels that we're not necessarily leading up to or living up to. And so this was the beginning of the journey. So let's take it further. I tell about where should we start the discussion? There's so much to talk about.
From the beginning.
Oh, very best place to start.
That's what I've always been told. The very beginning of Vidui, Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avoseinu, and sure enough, you have two opinions.
What up the marks right as you speak?
Two opinions. You might have seen it. The very beginning of the Vidui has one opinion that says, Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avoseinu, Tavei lefanecha tefiloseinu. Our prayers should come before you, mighty God. There's another opinion that puts in one word, it interjects the word Ana.
Interesting.
You might have seen it. Sometimes it's in parentheses. Ana. So what's the big deal with that? One word, it should be there, it shouldn't be there. Well, you see, the pattern with which we are doing Vidui is that which we follow our Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moshe's footsteps, where Moshe Rabbeinu said, Ana, chata ha'amazeh chata gedola. So that what we are doing is understanding that we cannot just ask for forgiveness. We cannot just say that we have done wrong. We have to say what we've done wrong. We have to describe it as chata gedola. We have to say what it is that our golden idol may have been. Each of us have our own egel hazav, all kinds of egle hazav in our lives. And like Moshe Rabbeinu, he had to say, yes, it's true. The people, we have created an egel hazav. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that that's what we had done. Moshe Rabbeinu had to say so. And he has to say exactly what we've done and why it's wrong. That's part of Vidui. It's not a way of just saying, I know I've done a whole bunch of things that I shouldn't have done, and I'm really sorry, and from now on I'm going to be. It's very important to actually specify what they are, say what they are, verbalize them, like Moshe did. And so one of the reasons to include that word Ana is because it's a pattern of how we do Vidui, patterned after the way Moshe Rabbeinu approached the Vidui that he, so to speak, offered on behalf of Am Yisrael at that great and important moment. And of course, his success culminated with his bringing down Luchos Shnios on Yom Kippur. So there's no better time to follow the pattern that Moshe Rabbeinu sets, no better time than Yom Kippur. So that's how we begin. But the actual beginning and most important part of this confession, or admission, as you said, Rabbi Trump, is, according to the Gemara in Seches Yoma, Avol anachnu va'avoseinu chatanu. Because again, you have to say, yes, I have done the wrong thing. We have sinned. It's interesting, we say the Vidui on Yom Kippur about 10 times. So we're saying it again and again and again. Why isn't it just enough to say it once? I've done the wrong thing. I admit that I've done the wrong thing. I care deeply about that. I verily ask you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to forgive me. Why again and again and again? Because human nature is such that when we repeat something, we reflect upon the words and reflect then inwardly upon our own souls, and it causes us to really care more sincerely about the fact that we've done something wrong, to really feel, I hate to say it, yes, to feel the guilt, but let's not use the word guilt, to feel the imperfection, to feel the sense of how better we could have been, how much better we want to be. You know, regret is very powerful when you have the flip side of it, which is a picture of what I could, should be, will be once I'm cleansed. All of this is how we think and feel about as we look back and then look forward. Charata on the past, Kabbalah al ha'asid. All of this is coming to mind, and it's felt much more deeply because we repeat it again and again and again. But Chazal, as I just said before, yeah.
Can I interrupt you for a second there? Because you just mentioned this, so interesting. So there's the element of the speech, but as you mentioned, there's other aspects. So there's Kabbalah ala asir, what you're supposed to be doing. There's Charata ala avar, the contrition, the regret of the past. How does the video like relate to all of those things? Meaning, like, you know, on the one hand, it's sometimes it's easy just to say, right? Meaning, like, how is the saying pulling together all those different pieces? Always is the same? Is it a different piece? I always wondered how those two come together.
Well, ultimately, they are going to meet up, so to speak, as you just described the pieces. You're going to meet up at the very end of the Vidui, where the sum total of what we arrive at is that we have done so much that's so incorrect that we are very humbled as a result. And with that humility, we ask you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to accept our pledge, Shelo echet ha'od, that I will not sin again. So that, yes, we go through the details of what we should have been doing better, things we should not have done at all, things that we should seek to improve upon in the future. And then we say, point blank, that we pledge not to repeat these behaviors. And that's at the very conclusion of the Vidui. So it's the Charata and Vidui and Kabbalah al ha'asid.
They all merge together at the end then.
It all begins, at the end, it is going to cause us to say, we are so humbled by going through again and again what it is that we have done wrong, that we almost admit that our raison d'etre for having been created has been circumvented. But we'll talk about that perhaps as we conclude.
Thank you, yeah.
And then, of course, there's the Kabbalah al ha'asid, which is the very climax or the conclusion of the Vidui. But the very beginning of it, Chazal point out the most important words are Avol, Anachnu, Va'avoseinu Chatanu. Until we say Avol, Anachnu, Va'avoseinu Chatanu, we are almost, I don't want to, say playing a game, but if we were to not quite be ready to admit, if we were to hold back, hesitate, and just kind of, obfuscate about ourselves and our past, so we would not really be able to say, yes, I am guilty. And that's why we tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no, that's not who we are. Ein anachnu azei panim ukshei oref. We are not audacious, we're not stiff-necked, we're not going to say, Lo chatonu. We're not going to say, tzadikim anachnu. And so when does it really begin? Where do we start to say the truth? The part that really causes us to have to be honest about who we are and be truthful and fess up and not hide anything. It begins with the words avol. Avol means it's true. It's absolutely true. Everything that is marked down, so to speak, and shown clearly before you in heaven, everything known to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as you, in your omniscience, know and understand it all, we now don't pretend to be able to hide any of it. We're not hiding from it. You know, after all, we know we can't hide it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we almost wish we could hide it from ourselves. We kind of wish we could somehow not have to face all of that which we have to face as we look in the mirror, in the spiritual mirror. As we do our own reckoning, we would almost want to turn away from it all because it's too painful to admit to ourselves. It's almost difficult. It would be such a difficult exercise for us to actually go through each and every aspect of our lives and all the possible ways in which we've done wrong, that we really don't want to do it. We'll just, somehow take an amorphous general pledge to do better and move on. No. Avol, it's true. Avol is very much like in the, in the German, Javol, which means it's absolutely true. I affirm that everything that you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, know about my weaknesses and frailties and how I've been errant in so many ways, every misstep and misdeed, avol, it's all true. Anachnu va'avoseinu chatonu. Now, why do we bring in avoseinu? What do you want from our poor avos? Are we blaming them? No, we're actually saying that we should have learned from their mistakes. And so many times we have not. And that therefore, sometimes if we continue to do the mistakes that our forefathers have perhaps made, and we just perpetrate the same and continue on the same paths, we're not less guilty, we're actually even more guilty. And that's why sometimes, yes, the sins of fathers are visited upon the sons, because we should have known better, we should have learned from them. And if we are continuing in Maisa Avos, which we should not, so then we are saying here, Avol anachnu va'avoseinu chaton. Then we say, using all of the letters of the Aleph Beis, Shamnu, Begadnu, Gezalnu, Glam, Daifim, we'll talk about some of them in a moment or two. And of course, the Aleph Beis is used again in the more explicit and more detailed descriptions of where we've gone wrong in the Al-Chet. The Al-Chet is also in the order of the Aleph Beis. The point is that from Aleph to Taf, with every aspect of man's ability to think and speak and act, and all of the description of how we think and speak and act, all of those are descriptions which are, of course, in Lashon HaKodesh. Aleph through Taf, we have done the wrong thing. There are mistakes we've made from beginning to end.
Beautiful. So just hearing about the honor, the aval, anachnu v'avoseinu chaton, and now going through the other Taf. It's interesting. I actually just came across a fascinating snippet this afternoon about, as you're talking about this, is that as we're doing that, I always find it funny. I see Bruce Mel is here. Is that we're doing and everybody loves that tune. Everybody's getting into it, and I don't know. For me, I always used to think of the words as oy oy oy. Oh yeah. Look what we're doing again, But I actually saw a fascinating thing. I saw quote in the name of the Chasam Sofer today that it's like the shear of the Levium, which would be said with a korban. And so there's an element of a korban, like you're saying, maybe like all the aleph base. In a certain sense, if you're doing this right, it's like bringing a korban that's accompanied by a shira of sorts, and that's how holy, that's how elevated this experience can be if it's done correctly. That's a very profound way of looking at it. Just as we go into this, which just sheds a different light on why there can actually, there's an element of happiness which can be associated with it. But maybe what we should do is we were discussing this before. Maybe really, if Rebbe is comfortable addressing some of the Shamnus, I'll take a few of the Al-Chaitz. Maybe we can try to do this in a way that hopefully we have a chance to, as we, all of us on this virtual share, the opportunity of going through and taking a little bit of time to prepare, so as we arrive at our Yom Kippur, we are perhaps a little more advanced, a little more closer to understanding what we're trying to do.
Well, first of all, the fact that the word right before Hashamnu is chatanu. Now, chet is usually b'shegeg, that which was perpetrated inadvertently. It's an inadvertence. In actuality, what the Kohen Gadol would confess would be chatu, avu, pashu. All the sins that are intentional, sins that are self-seeking, sins that are even rebellious. And here we only say chatanu. It's not because we're better than they were in the days of the Kohen Gadol. On the contrary, there was a mashal someone once gave, which is that if someone is just so, bedridden as to not being able to take care of themselves, and they hear calamity out in the street, and people are running for their lives, and they're all fleeing town, and this person is not able to get up on his own 2 feet to run, he would be foolish to start asking questions about the details. Well, what happened? What's wrong exactly? Why are we all running out of town? Where is the emergency? What's the nature of the emergency? If someone in that position starts to get into details, it might be too late for him to find someone to carry him out and to save him. We're not able to get into the details. So we're saying chatanu, all kinds of chataim. And it's so desperate a situation that we're not even going to say chatanu, pashanu, avinu. That's true, we'll get to that. But the opening line, Aval anachnu v'avasenu chatanu, is meant to be that general because it's basically trying to say we're in such a bad spiritual state. We've done all kinds of things. We're just going to use the umbrella term, the all-encompassing term of chatanu, which will include all of them. And then we start getting into some of the details. What's beautiful about the Hasham, the Begamnu, the Gezalnu, the Baron Daife, is that, again, it uses the Aleph base, but it's very, very broad. Hashamnu means we're very guilty. We've done the wrong thing. Bagadnu means we've done something that's like begida, like rebelliousness, treachery. There's so much that we should have done better and so much that we owe to the Ribono Shel Olam that it's begida. It's not just the typical kind of sin, it's betrayal, where we owed something and instead of doing what we should have and having the sense of fealty and doing honorably by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have been betraying him, we've acted treacherously. Gezalnu is a general term for all kinds of illicit gain. Dibarnu Dofi, similarly, for all kinds of missteps of speech. He'evinu, that's of course not just evus on our own part, but he'evinu, which of course means to cause others to act incorrectly, to act perversely. And similarly, hirshanu, it means that we have caused rishus. After all, when we are making mistakes and we are good people, seemingly, we're setting bad examples. If all around us there's an atmosphere created by what we do that's incorrect, then we are not only ourselves acting incorrectly, we are fomenting incorrect behavior. He'evinu v'hirshanu. Zadnu, of course, means that sometimes it was bemezid, meaning intentionally so. Chamasnu is a fascinating expression because chamas, according to the classic interpretation, is something that you can't necessarily even collect for in Bezdin. It might be something less than a shavapruta, but it means something that you would do because of such lack of consideration and because of your scale of judgment being so incorrectly and so unbalanced that you would take advantage of and make use of something or of someone in such a petty way that it would be called chamas. And similarly, tafalnu sheker, with the tes. Everybody knows what the tafel means. Tafel means something that's nebulous, something that isn't of great weight. In other words, you're involved in something that's sheker. For what purpose? For what reason? For what gain? And it's a tafel compared to what's true and to what's important. So you've wasted so much of your life force on what? On a tafel? That's sheker. So these are very, very powerful, very, very powerful. Similarly, it's not just that I did something wrong, but I gave someone a bad eitzah. Whether I intended to or not, if I intended to, it's much worse. That's the classic lifnei iver l'titin michshol. Kizavnu, to be untrue. Latznu. Leitzanus means everything that is of value, I deny its value, I scoff at it, I take everything that's worth gold and I say, it's not even brass. And you bring things that are special and holy and destroy them and shatter them in our own lives or in someone else's minds, in someone else's mind and attitude. So latznu is, maradnu, of course, again means rebelliousness. Yatznu means to cause HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be so angry, to infuriate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Well, to infuriate HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the characteristic of being ma'arich af. Yatznu is just, again, something that's so powerful in describing that we've done things that are so maddening, if you will, k'vayochel, if you could say so anthropomorphically about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So all of these in the Ashamdu, they are very broad and general. They're not so much specific sins, but they're descriptive of a not caring and a lack of care and of certain selfishness sometimes. It's just taking all the great human faculties of thought and speech and attitude and human drive and energy, and we've done so much corrupting of them all, and we put that in the Aleph Beis order of Hashem the Begadnu Gazam.
So interesting. Rabbi, as you were saying this, I was just like, I'm realizing that sometimes I feel like I gravitate more towards the Hashamnus, and sometimes I gravitate more towards the Al-Khaits. And part of the reason is because the Al-Khaits are so specific, they can be very painful to read. But sometimes the Al-Shamnus, like you were saying, are so broad that there's enough space to really understand a lot about oneself in them. Like you were saying, because when you read something like Moradnu, like you just said, Moradnu is so big. We all have our own place in that. We all have our own way of, our own Latznu. I mean, that's one of the greatest things this generation. There's so much space for us to be there. So sometimes it's even more frightening to think about the generalities and the specifics when it comes to this. This is I was just thinking as you're describing these terms. What I find sometimes helpful is when I look at the Al-Khaits myself, is at the back of the art scroll Machzor, which is really, really fantastic. They put a beautiful, at the very, very, very end, they put a beautiful commentary, mostly based actually on the Michtav Meliyahu. Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler has a commentary on the Al-Khaits, and they summarize it very well over here. The truth is that it's not always easy to read while you're in the middle of the Shemona Esrei, which is why it's always a good idea to take a little time just before Yom Kippur to do a little bit of that reading ahead of time, to really put oneself into that zone. I just three ones which to me strike me. Everyone strikes me at a different time every year, but the first one itself is Ba'oines of a Ratzon, when we willingly or not willingly sinned. And I always think about the oines, like oines in our lives. We're very good in this generation of saying, I didn't have a choice. I had to. I was caught. There was no choice. So it's interesting that that's usually used as an excuse. The person had no choice. They grew up in a tough neighborhood. Now, my back to the wall. Whatever it is, we have a lot of ways where we excuse ourselves. I had to. The Vilna Gaon says that that's true. A lot of times we put ourselves in the situation where we had to. It's like the way the Gemara in Ksubas describes it. It's describing it about men. Is it saying if a man has two paths to take, and one of them is going to be going by the riverbank, and the women are washing the clothes in the river, and it's not always the most sneers of a place for a man to be walking. So the man says, "I'll go there and I won't look," and he ends up gazing and at the women while they're washing the clothes. So you say, well, he laced Brera, he was there. So the answer is no, he should have made the right choice at the beginning. He shouldn't have gone on that path. Now, whatever it is, and that's just an example, that's a, so to speak, a model of so many times in life we choose that path. We choose that path where it's going to be difficult for us. And then at the end we say, I didn't have a choice, it was difficult. But the Vilna Gaon says is that a lot of times in life we have to think about the situations we put ourselves into in the first place before we get to the impossibilities that we have to face. That's a big responsibility. Sometimes it's like, when choosing the school for a child, later on there's going to be certain influences and situations and so on. So you say, that's what the school's like, but you chose to be in the school. So there's so many times where we have to think about ahead of the game. That's what the Vilna Gaon is saying. Another one, just perhaps two snippets. What is that we say in Gimel, what was revealed and what was hidden. What's interesting is usually it's climactic. Usually it goes from the lesser to the worse. So this way it's a little funny because surely the greatest damage is done publicly, right? You go and make a chil Hashem, God forbid, in the public. It's much worse than when you do it in private. So why is Baseiser second, almost anticlimactically? So the Notib Yehuda says a very beautiful thing. He says, no, well, when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is both there in public and is in your house. But the fact that you're being a very obedient and wonderful Jew in the public eye, but at home you're living a corrupt and we'll call less than perfect life, indicates that HaKadosh Baruch Hu only matters to you when other people think think it's important. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is just there with you and just you in vacation and no one else and davening and those kind of questions, that itself goes to the greatest acid test of the true value of a person's relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the climax, therefore, is Baseiser. How are we by ourselves? These are very hard questions to answer. And finally, one last one, which I almost always cry for, is one which comes back to the very name of what we're talking about now, which is the Vov, Vidui Peh. Is that we do Vidui just with our mouths, not necessarily with our hearts. The Belzer Rebbe says a very beautiful thing. He says that there was a fellow who lives in one of these villages, Backwardsville, and he comes to the main city for the market day. And as he comes into the city, he's busy trading, and he hears a drum being beaten, and everybody starts running away, and everybody gets frightened. He says, "What's going on?" So he said, "No, when they bang the drum, that's a fire. It's to indicate there's a fire, and everybody should come to help put out the fire." So that's fantastic. The next week he's back in his village. There's a fire, and he quickly runs around. He rummages in his basement, and he finds his drum, and he goes on the streets, and he starts banging on the drum, and the fire burns down the city. So he says, "I don't understand. I was banging the drum." He says, "No, it wasn't the drum. The drum was supposed to notify everybody else to take a call to action." So the Belzer Rebbe says, we talk about it and we do all the actions and we're banging the drum, but there's no water there to put out the fire, right? If there's nothing else there, then that, which I think brings us full circle, is the idea that we're trying to work on riches now, is that the Ansheknes like Dola, the Chazal, as they put together these elements of the Vidui at the very stages that they were instituted, they were giving us the tools to be able to get there. We have to be willing to use the tools. We have to be willing to actually take heed of them, to find 1, 2, 3 things that we can perhaps this year earn and make ourselves, make our own as we move through it and we look inwards as we go through. So just food for thought as in terms of our moving forward. Hopefully we're now Monday evening, which means to say Yom Kippur will be Monday evening 1 week from now, which is the opportunity for us to perhaps invest ourselves. As Rabbi Talman was talking about the Shamna Bogadnus, in the generalities, the honor, the Aval Anachnu, the Avosenu, the Aval, all the elements of this Aleph Beis, and the Al Chetz, the very specific cases, to find a place that we can find ourselves as was Hashem, and we should be Zoiche B'Din.
Amen.
Maybe any other thoughts?
I would just conclude by asking everyone to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us along in this process. And it's not my idea. The words in the Vidui themselves say, Yehi Ratzon Milefanecha, Hashem Elokai v'Elokei Avisai. May it be your will. Sheloi Echet Ha'oid. Think about that. We are so sure that we are challenged, we are so experienced in our past failure, that we know we have to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us, that we shall not revert, slip back. So we say, may it be your will that we not do chet anymore. After all, why don't we just say, stand up like a man, stand up like a woman, and say, I did the wrong thing, I now pledge I won't. When we make that pledge, we do it so humbly as to say, help me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. May it be your will that the circumstance of my life and the way my every day unfolds should be one that's easier for me to not sin. Because we are so broken, as we say, we are kichlimale busha uchlim, that without your help, we don't know how we're ever going to be able to do it. So part of what we conclude with is a sense of such humility as to not believe in ourselves to be strong enough for our own future's sake, and we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, help, shelo echta od, help me, shelo echta od. And it's not a cop-out. We're not saying, well, I couldn't, make the guarantee myself, so I'm asking you to help me. It's because we are so deeply convinced of our weaknesses, personal weaknesses, and so full of literal shame, busha and chlima, that we don't have the ability to say lo echta od without first saying Yehi ratzon, may it be your will, help me Hashem, shelo echta od. That's how powerful the Vidui is, changing us and causing us to have so much trust in Hashem and so little faith in only ourselves alone. And then we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, therefore, cleanse us of the past, but the Kabbalah for the future is so humble as to include that we only believe we might be able to be better with your help, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe we have HaKadosh Baruch Hu's assistance in everything, but particularly in moving on in the life of Shelo Echta Od.
Amen. Amen. Rabbi, thank you for your time, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It should be a Gemar v'chasava tova, our Vidui. Should have HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help for our Vidui to be answered.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Trump.
Laila tov, everybody.